Somalia is among countries expected to suffer after the United Kingdom's Barclays Bank closed the accounts of up to 100 small and medium-sized community-based money transfer agencies. Somalis living in the UK largely use these community-based money transfer agencies to send money home, but Barclays now says it will be withdrawing the services that they use as a conduit for money in order to avoid services being used as a conduit for money laundering. Barclays is the last major UK bank that still provides such money transfer services, but it fears that some of these money transfer agencies do not have the proper checks in place to spot and prevent that sort of criminal activity. Now, over 250 money transfer companies in the UK now face closure, and it's estimated that as much as $100 million is transferred from the United Kingdom to families and charities in Somalia. Barclays' move was the subject of debate at the British House of Commons earlier on Wednesday. Let's cross over live to London now, where CCTV's Miriam Bemard is standing by for a bit more insight into what happened late on Wednesday. Miriam, the Economic Secretary in the Treasury, of course, on Wednesday, saying that there's a meeting that will take place between the regulators, the British Bankers Association and the government, of course, will take part as well. Do we have any idea when this meeting will take place?
Well, Rama, as it stands, some experts are saying we may see a meeting in the fall. This issue has quite an impact on money actually leaving the UK, as you were saying. We're talking about $3.2 billion of remittance a year around the world sent from the UK. But it's also important to address the issues on both sides, ensuring that people who need to use these services don't actually fall prey to desperate measures, possibly destroying a regulated system which could be reformed and replacing it with an illegal underground service.
Indeed. Also, it emerged in yesterday's debate that DFID has an assessment that initial indicators essentially point to a limited impact, if you will, on developing economies. Now, that, of course, may make sense in countries that have formal banking systems. But what about Somalia, which really doesn't have a formal banking system, at least as we know it, in the Western world?
Absolutely. This will have a tremendous impact on Somalia, not only economically, but also socially, with the public possibly losing a major financial lifeline, if you will. Financial remittance provides millions of people access to funds, and it's part of the normal system, given there's a lack of an official banking system, as you were just saying. It's used by thousands of Somalis, non-Somalis, international organizations like the UN, World Health Organization, World Bank. These money transfer services play a tremendous role in both the private and public sector. In fact, experts say that these transfer systems handle between $1 and $2 billion annually. Indeed,
and they also support about 3.8 million people in Somalia as well. Let's talk about some numbers, however. If these small community-based money transfer firms in the UK have to switch over to MoneyGram or Western Union, by how much would costs rise?
Well, right now it's difficult to tell exactly, but global firms like Western Union and MoneyGram are regulated by the country they operate in. But as the top two global firms by volume, they handle about 4% of the money transfer market. Now, Western Union received over $1 billion in so-called foreign exchange revenue in 2011. That, Rama, rose by 5% in 2012. So they're poised to profit. In fact, experts say that aside from the transfer fees, these global transfer firms profit as they buy batches of currencies at a wholesale rate. The money transfer companies don't disclose the spreads they benefit from when they set exchange rates.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, though. Thank you very much for that insight. That's CCTV's Miriam Bemard live over in London. Now let's move on to South Africa, where cabin crew and ground staff belonging to the South African Transport and Allied Workers Union, SATAWU, down their tools on Thursday after talks over salary hikes broke down. Now, earlier on, the United Association of South Africa sector manager Willie van Eden mentioned that his union and SATAWU were meant to sign a wage deal with the airline on Tuesday. This comes after the two unions, which represent about 70% or so of SAA's cabin crew and ground staff, had made an in-principle agreement for 6.5% increase in basic salaries, house allowances and medical aid contributions. According to Eden, however, SATAWU never showed up to the talks and decided to lift the strike suspension that had been in place because of alleged unruly management by SAA. South African Airways, however, has confirmed that there's been no disruption to flight schedule so far. The airline also says it is still open to discussions and is eager to reach an amicable solution with all the parties involved. Let's get the latest details from CCTV's Sumitra Naidu. She's live in Johannesburg at the moment. Sumitra, what sort of contingency plans does SAA have in place to mitigate the effects of this strike?
Well, Rama, SAA says that it has extra staff booked on the various shifts. It also has a number of casual staff that are on a standby. But they said there was no need to roll out any of those contingency measures, and it doesn't believe that it will need to roll it out because the strike has been very minimal in terms of disruptions for the airline thus far. The SAA is saying that only a handful of people, about 34 people, went on a strike today. So there's no real need for those contingency measures, but they are saying that they're ready. SATAWU, on the other hand, says that 4,000 of its members work for SAA and its strike is only just gaining momentum.
Indeed. According, of course, to Mr. Eden from the United Association of South Africa, part of the reason as to why SATAWU didn't sign the deal is, quote, because of some cabin crew issues. What exactly are the concerns there?
Well, you know, the main issue here, when I spoke to SATAWU a short while ago, the main issue for them is that they believe that SAA is negotiating in bad faith. They said that they went to the negotiating table, they agreed on initially 6.23%, and then later they agreed to 6.5%, and SAA went against them and actually implemented a 6.23% wage hike. SAA saying that that's what they agreed to in principle. So the main issue for SATAWU now, they believe that SAA is dealing in some underhanded tactics, and they're not happy with that. Another burning issue for SATAWU is the lack of transformation at SAA. It says that 98% of all of the pilots working for SAA are still white, and they have a standing agreement with management for a 15% wage hike every year. So, of course, this is making them very upset. This is one of their big burning issues at this point.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, though. Thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Sumitra Naidu live in Johannesburg concerning this strike that, of course, has afflicted SAA. Now, let's talk about another airline. Until a couple of years ago, few airlines were willing to fly into Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia, at all. More than 2 decades of civil war has essentially made that Horn of Africa country a no-go zone without a viable air transport sector. But with increasing stability, international airlines are now bringing back much-needed transport links for travellers and businessmen. CCTV's Mohammed Himoge has the details.
2 months ago, the United Nations returned air traffic management to the Somali government. It was a significant step aimed at boosting the country's aviation sector and links to the rest of the world. The move has attracted new airlines, including Uganda's national carrier, Air Uganda, which has launched direct flights to Entebbe 3 times a week.
This is the second international airline that comes to Mogadishu. The first is Turkish Airline. The second African airline is Air Uganda. This is a very good day for Mogadishu, and it's a very good day for the Mogadishu travelers.
For travelers to Entebbe, the introduction has meant a shorter journey. Air Uganda's direct flight has reduced the journey from 8 to 2 hours, as passengers bound for Uganda earlier had to transit through Nairobi.
And this is going to reduce time for the Somalis and the Ugandans who want to come here. And this will help to cement our relationship further, and will promote communication between the people, business, goods, and so life will be greatly improved.
Since February last year, Turkish Airlines remained the only international carrier that offered direct flights to Somalia. For 18 years, the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization managed Somalia's airspace, and now as stability strengthens, several international carriers eye Somalia as a viable destination. Mohammed Himoge, CCTV, Mogadishu.
On the other side of the continent, the 30th edition of the Luanda International Trade Fair, locally known as FILDA, opened on Tuesday this week. With the participation of more than 1,000 exhibitors from about 35 or so countries, this fair aims to attract investment and boost the long-term development of Angola's economy. CCTV's Peter Akaba reports.
This year, the event was held under the theme of the challenges of attracting investment. In the opening ceremony, Angolan authorities stressed the need for the country to grab the unique opportunity and build partnerships between local entrepreneurs and foreign investors.
Through the reduction of costs, we aim to become a competitive port. At the same time, we made some investments recently, mainly for construction of the infrastructure and in the process, developing the efficiency of the port.
As Angola's largest trading partner, Chinese companies were well represented at this year's event. With more than 40 companies from China attending the fair, it was hard to miss the country's prominent pavilion. The cultural opening show also added color to the event. According to the Chinese ambassador in Angola, Gao Keqiang, trade between Angola and China reached $37.5 billion in 2012. The bilateral trade is currently 1,000 times higher than it was 30 years ago, adding that bilateral cooperation supported national reconstruction in Angola and also played a positive role in the socio-economic growth of China. The Luanda International Fair is organized by FIL, a public company established in 2007 with the objective to promote the potential of the Angolan market and attract international investment. The fair occupies an area of 3.4 hectares, covering 5 pavilions. Peter Akaba, CCTV.
Some of the market losses we were looking at earlier in the day essentially were reversed by the close of trade as far as the bourses in Africa are concerned. The all-share index in Nigeria had the highest nominal gains on the day, up almost a 4 percentage point. The all-share index in South Africa on the day when they held rates up by about 10 percentage points, 0.1%. The 20-share index in Nairobi up by almost half a percentage point. And finally, the EGX 30 relatively flat on the day. That's business for you this Thursday.